Ethan Thompson returned home, hoping to surprise his parents with a life brimming with success, but what he found at the entrance of his own sprawling estate left him frozen, two trembling elders in the snow, cast out like refuse. He never imagined that sight would plunge him into an abyss of guilt he could never forget. The sleek black car pulled up to the mansion just as the Canadian winter sun began to dip below the horizon. Ethan stepped out, a triumphant smile gracing his face, adjusting his cashmere overcoat as he admired the imposing three-story structure that now belonged to him. He had meticulously planned this moment for months, to surprise his parents, to show them that their son had finally achieved the success they had always dreamed of for him. But when his eyes fell upon the side entrance of the property, his smile froze on his face, like the ice that coated the ground. Two figures were huddled in the snow, wrapped in a threadbare blanket that barely shielded them from the biting wind. An elderly man embraced a white-haired woman, both shivering from the cold. Beside them lay two worn suitcases and a cardboard box with photographs peeking from the edges. They looked discarded, like rubbish, on that icy winter night. Ethan felt something shatter within his chest as he recognized their faces. They were his parents. Arthur and Eleanor Thompson, the beings who had given him life, were sitting in the snow like homeless people outside the house he had bought to impress his fiancée, the house he had never told them he lived in. "Dad! Mom!" Ethan cried, rushing towards them, his heart utterly broken. "What are you doing here? My God, you're freezing." Arthur looked up, his tired eyes, filled with suppressed tears, met his son's. There was no reproach in that gaze, only an infinite sadness that pierced Ethan like a knife. "My boy," the old man murmured, his voice cracking. "We didn't want to bother you. Gus told us you lived here, but the lady who came out told us we couldn't come in, that this house wasn't a place for people like us." Ethan felt the ground open beneath his feet. He knelt before his parents, taking his mother's icy hands in his own. Eleanor looked at him with those eyes that had once regarded him with infinite pride, but now reflected only shame and pain. "Forgive us, my son," she whispered, her voice brittle. "We didn't mean to embarrass you in front of your people. We're leaving now. Gus will be here for us soon." "Embarrass you?" Ethan felt tears burn his cheeks. "You could never embarrass me. Who did this to you? Who kicked you out?" The grand front door of the mansion swung open with a sharp thud. Victoria Sterling appeared in the doorway, enveloped in a pearl-colored evening gown that shimmered under the entrance lights. Her perfect face bore an expression of utter annoyance, as if the presence of those elders was a stain on her flawless celebration. "Ethan, what are you doing out there?" she asked, her voice cold. "The guests are waiting. We're announcing our engagement tonight, remember?" Ethan rose slowly, his parents still trembling behind him. Fury began to boil within him, mixing with a suffocating guilt. "Victoria, was it you? You threw my parents out onto the street." She let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Your parents, Ethan?" "Two shabbily dressed old people knocked on the door asking to speak with you. I told them this house isn't a shelter for indigents. How was I supposed to know they were?" She paused, looking at them with disdain. "Though, seeing them now, I understand why you never mentioned them. They don't exactly fit the image we've built, do they?" The silence that followed was crushing. Several guests had ventured to the entrance, drawn by the commotion. Men and women in impeccable suits observed the scene with expressions ranging from surprise to thinly veiled mockery. Ethan heard the whispers that began to spread like wildfire. "Poor old folks, those are his parents. What a shame. I didn't know Thompson came from such humble beginnings." Arthur tried to stand, stumbling. Ethan rushed to support him, but his father stopped him with a trembling hand. "No, my boy, we've caused enough trouble. Your mother and I will leave. You have your life, your people. We didn't come to ruin anything. You're not going anywhere." Ethan's voice boomed in the icy air, filled with a rage he had never felt before. "This is your home as much as it is mine." Victoria descended the steps with calculated strides, her heels echoing on the stone. She crossed her arms, looking at Ethan with a mixture of disappointment and absolute coldness. "Ethan, don't be ridiculous. Think about what you're doing. All our partners are inside. The contract with the Caldwells is about to be signed. Are you really going to ruin everything for my parents?" Ethan interrupted her, his voice trembling with emotion. "Are you listening to yourself, Victoria? Do you realize what you just did?" "What I did was protect our reputation," she retorted, unperturbed. "You and I are building an empire. We can't afford sentimental weaknesses. I thought you understood that." Eleanor began to cry silently, covering her face with her hands. Arthur hugged her tightly, as if to shield her from the entire world. Ethan felt something within him definitively break as he saw his parents like this, humiliated, frozen, destroyed outside the house he had bought with money he earned, forgetting about them. "I worked my whole life," Arthur said suddenly, his voice firm despite the pain. "I was a construction worker, a laborer, whatever was necessary, so this boy could study. His mother sewed late into the night to pay for his books. We never had much, but we always had dignity. And now," his voice broke, "now I discover my son is ashamed of us. Isn't that right?" Ethan fell to his knees before his father. "Dad, I never." "Then why did you never come to see us, my boy?" His mother's question was a whisper, laden with years of pain. "Why did you stop calling? Why, when Gus tried to reach you, did you always say you were busy?" Ethan had no answer. The words caught in his throat as memories crashed over him like waves. The ignored calls, the empty excuses, the broken promises to visit soon. He had convinced himself that he was building a better future, that once he had enough success, then he would come back for them, give them everything they deserved. But the truth was darker and simpler. He had been ashamed of his modest background in front of Victoria and her social circle, ashamed of the humble house where he grew up, ashamed of his father's calloused hands and his mother's simple English. He had traded the two people who loved him unconditionally for a world that accepted him only for his money. "Mr. Thompson," a rough voice interrupted the moment. An older man in sturdy overalls approached from the street, carrying a steaming thermos. "I brought hot coffee for Arthur and Eleanor. I couldn't leave them out here any longer." It was Gus, his parents' old, trusted friend, now their only real support. The man who had raised chickens in the yard of their humble home, who had taught Ethan how to ride a bike, who never stopped calling him my boy, no matter how much money he had. Gus looked at Ethan with a mixture of disappointment and sadness that hurt more than any reproach. "Arthur told me about you weeks ago, young Ethan. He said he wanted to see you, that he needed to tell you something important. I tried to locate you, left messages, but you were always in meetings, on trips, at important dinners." Ethan felt the world stop. "Dad needed to see me? Why? What happened?" Arthur looked away, but Eleanor spoke, her voice trembling. "The doctors said his heart is very weak, my boy, that he doesn't have much time left. That's why we wanted to see you one last time. We just wanted to say goodbye." The cry that escaped Ethan was a primitive, tearing sound. He clung to his father like a lost child, sobbing uncontrollably as the guests observed the scene with stone faces. Some murmured, others looked away uncomfortably, but Victoria remained motionless on the steps, her arms still crossed, without a trace of compassion in her perfectly made-up expression. "I didn't know," Ethan cried. "Dad, I didn't know. Forgive me. Please, forgive me." Arthur stroked his son's head with trembling hands. "There's nothing to forgive, my boy. You chose your path, and that's all right. We just wanted to see you one more time before I go, that's all." Gus helped the elders to their feet. Arthur swayed, and Ethan held him tightly, feeling how fragile the body that once seemed invincible had become. "I'll take them back home," Gus said softly. "They've had enough cold." "No," Ethan interjected. "They're staying here. This is their home now." Victoria descended the last steps, her patience finally exhausted. "Ethan, listen to me carefully. If those people enter this house, I leave. And not just me, the Caldwells, the partners, the entire business we've built. You'll have to choose. Your past of hardship or our future of success." The silence was absolute. Even the wind seemed to halt. All eyes were on Ethan, awaiting his decision. His father looked at him with eyes full of tears, but also of understanding, as if he already knew the answer. His mother squeezed Arthur's hand, preparing for another disappointment. Ethan looked at Victoria, then at his parents, and in that moment, something that had been dormant within him finally awoke. "Gus," Ethan said, his voice firm, wiping away his tears, "take my parents inside, to the master bedroom. Have them prepare the most comfortable bed in the house." "Ethan," Victoria began, her voice menacing. "You," he interrupted her, looking at her with eyes that, for the first time, saw clearly. "You can stay or you can leave, but I'll tell you something. I built an empire on the backs of two people who sacrificed everything for me, and for years I pretended they didn't exist because I was ashamed of where I came from. Tonight I found my sick father sitting in the snow, and if that doesn't break your heart, then you are not the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with." A murmur rippled through the guests. Victoria paled, incredulous. "You're leaving me for them?" "I'm not leaving you for them," Ethan responded. "I'm leaving you because I discovered that the man I became with you is someone I don't recognize, someone who left his parents on the street, and that's not the man I want to be." Victoria took a step back, her eyes shining with rage. "You'll regret this, Ethan Thompson, I swear it." She turned on her heels and stormed into the house with furious steps. The guests began to disperse, some avoiding Ethan's gaze, others murmuring among themselves. In minutes, the mansion was almost empty, only the echo of slamming doors and engines starting. Ethan knelt before his parents one last time that night. "Forgive me, please. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." Arthur smiled weakly, caressing his son's face. "You already have, my boy. You already have." Gus helped the elders into the house. Ethan followed, closing the door behind him, but in the silence of that icy night, a question began to pound in his mind. Why had Gus said he tried to locate him for weeks when he never received a single message? And more importantly, who had made sure those messages never reached him? The days that followed were like waking from a nightmare to discover that reality was even worse. Ethan had completely transformed his life. He cancelled important meetings, ignored calls from furious partners, and turned his mansion into a sanctuary for his parents. But every smile he managed to coax from Eleanor, every moment of peace beside Arthur, was accompanied by a guilt that devoured him from within like a slow poison. On the morning of the third day, as he prepared breakfast in a kitchen he had never truly used, he heard faint footsteps descending the stairs. Arthur appeared at the entrance, leaning on the cane Gus had found for him. His pale face showed the effort it had taken him just to come down to the main floor. "Dad, you should be resting," Ethan said quickly, putting down the pan and rushing to support him. "I've rested too much in my life, my boy," the old man replied with a tired smile. "Now I want to live every minute I have left, especially these ones with you." They sat together at the dining room table, an Italian marble table that Ethan had once bought to impress guests who never returned after that night. Arthur observed the house with eyes that seemed to see much more than Ethan would have wanted to show. "It's a beautiful house, my boy, but it feels empty, as if no one has truly lived here." The words fell upon Ethan like stones. He was right. He had filled that mansion with expensive objects, with art he didn't understand, with furniture he never used, but he had never made it a home. "Dad," Ethan began, his voice cracking, "I need to ask you something. Gus said he tried to contact me, that he called weeks ago to tell me you were sick, but I never received any messages, calls, or emails. Nothing." Arthur took a slow sip of coffee, his hands trembling slightly. "Gus showed me the call logs on his phone. He called your office 14 times in 3 weeks. They always told him you were busy, that they'd pass on the message, but you never returned the calls. That's impossible." Ethan felt his blood run cold. "My assistant always passes on all my messages. All of them." "Your assistant?" Arthur asked. "What's her name?" "Sarah Jensen. She's been working with me for 3 years. She's completely reliable." The old man nodded slowly, but something in his gaze suggested he knew more than he was saying. "My boy, in these days here, I've seen things. I've overheard conversations that perhaps I shouldn't have, and there's something you need to know about the night we arrived." Ethan leaned forward, his heart pounding. "What is it, Dad?" Before Arthur could respond, the front door burst open. Victoria stormed in, followed by 2 suited men. Ethan immediately recognized Richard Caldwell and his son James, the most important partners in his company. "Ethan, we need to talk now," Victoria ordered, completely ignoring Arthur's presence. "It's not a good time," Ethan replied, standing up. "I'm with my father." Richard Caldwell stepped forward. His usually kind face was now a mask of severity. "Thompson, the board of directors met last night. Your behavior was unacceptable. You humiliated Victoria in front of key investors. The merger contract with our companies is suspended until further notice. And not just that," James added, crossing his arms. "Several clients are withdrawing their accounts. They say they can't trust someone so emotionally unstable." Ethan felt rage boiling inside him. "Unstable? I defended my parents from an act of cruelty. If that's instability, then I don't want to be part of your world." Victoria let out a bitter laugh. "Your world no longer exists, Ethan. I checked the numbers this morning. Without the Caldwell contract, your company loses 70% of its revenue. In 3 months, you'll be bankrupt." "Then I'll be bankrupt," he responded, surprising himself with the firmness of his voice. "But I won't be alone." "How touching," Victoria said with sarcasm. "The successful entrepreneur gives up everything for his elderly parents. It's almost poetic. Too bad poetry doesn't pay mortgages." Arthur rose with effort, leaning on the table. His voice, though weak, resonated with an authority that surprised everyone. "Miss, I don't know what kind of person you are, but I'll tell you something. I've lived many years with nothing but the love of my family, And I've seen rich men die completely alone, surrounded by luxuries, but with no one to mourn their passing. My son chose love over money, and that is the only real wealth that exists." The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria paled, but quickly recomposed her mask of coldness. "What a nice speech. But speeches don't feed you." She turned to Ethan. "You have 48 hours to reconsider, or you lose everything." The three left, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and veiled threats. Ethan helped his father sit down again, noticing how he trembled from the effort that small act of courage had cost him. "Dad, you shouldn't have." "Someone had to say it," Arthur interrupted. "That woman has poison in her heart, my boy. And what I was going to tell you before they arrived is important. The night we came, before they threw us out, I overheard Victoria talking on the phone in the study. She thought we were asleep in the waiting room where the butler left us." "What did you hear, Dad?" Arthur took a deep breath, as if the words cost him physical pain. "She was telling someone named My Love that everything was going according to plan, that soon you would have to choose between us and your company, and that when you chose wrong, as she expected, she would finally have total control of your company." Ethan felt the floor move beneath his feet. "That doesn't make sense. Victoria doesn't have access to my company. We're partners in some projects, but—" Arthur's voice broke. "She also said something else. She said, Sarah did a perfect job blocking that annoying old man's calls. He never knew his father was sick until it was too late to do anything that wouldn't make him look like the villain." Ethan's world collapsed at that instant. Sarah, his trusted assistant for 3 years, the woman who managed his schedule, filtered his calls, had access to all his emails. She had been the invisible hand that kept him away from his parents, even when they desperately needed him. "Why?" Ethan whispered. "Why would she do that?" Arthur placed a trembling hand on his son's. "Because someone asked her to, or paid her to, and I think we both know who." Before Ethan could respond, Gus burst into the kitchen, his face distraught with terror. "Mr. Ethan," Eleanor fell upstairs. "She can't get up." Ethan bounded up the stairs 3 at a time, his heart hammering against his chest. He found his mother on the hallway floor, clutching a manila envelope with trembling hands. Her face was pale, and tears streamed down her wrinkled cheeks. Mom, what happened?" Ethan knelt beside her, helping her sit against the wall. Eleanor held up the envelope with trembling hands. Her voice came out as a broken whisper. "My boy, I went into your study looking for a book for your father, and I found this. Forgive me, I didn't mean to snoop, but when I saw the photos, I couldn't." With clumsy hands, Ethan opened the envelope. His world crumbled for a second time that morning. Photographs. Victoria kissing James Caldwell in a hotel. Victoria signing documents in a lawyer's office, and a prenuptial agreement that sent chills down his spine. In case of divorce or separation, Victoria would be entitled to 50% of all Ethan Thompson's properties and businesses. But what completely devastated him was the date on the contract. It had been signed 6 months before he proposed to her. Everything had been a trap from the beginning. "Son," Eleanor whispered, her voice broken with pain, "that woman never loved you. She only wanted your money. And when she saw that we could make you reject her, she decided to use our love against you. She turned us into a weapon to destroy you." Ethan helped his mother to her feet, holding her as she clung to him as if he were the only solid thing in a crumbling world. Gus rushed in with a glass of water, his face reflecting the concern of a father for his child. Arthur appeared in the hallway, gasping from the effort of climbing the stairs. Seeing the photos on the floor, his expression darkened with a mixture of rage and sadness. "Dad, you need to rest," Ethan pleaded, guiding both parents towards the master bedroom. "I'll rest when you're safe," the old man replied stubbornly. "My boy, listen to me. That woman set a trap for you, but traps work both ways. If she has secrets, you can find them and use them to protect yourself. I'm not like her, Dad. I don't play dirty." Eleanor took her son's face in her hands, forcing him to look her in the eyes. "It's not about playing dirty, my son. It's about justice, about preventing her from destroying more people. My dearest son, if there's one thing I learned in my life, it's this. Silence in the face of evil is complicity. You cannot let her get away with this." Ethan looked at his parents, fragile, elderly, ill, and yet stronger than he had ever been, because they understood something he had forgotten in his race for success, that true strength comes not from power or money, but from integrity and love. "All right," he finally said, "but we'll do it right, without revenge, just truth." That night, while his parents slept in the master bedroom, Ethan sat in his study with Gus. The older man had been a silent witness to the entire story, observing from the shadows as the boy he had helped raise got lost in a world of ambition and betrayal. "Gus, I need your help. I need to know everything you saw, everything you heard. Every detail counts." The man nodded slowly, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. "There's something else Arthur didn't tell you, young man. The night we arrived, I heard Miss Sterling talking with someone else besides the one she called my love. A man. She was telling him that you were the last obstacle to something big, that once she had you under control or out of the picture, the real project could begin." "Real project? What project?" Gus extended the folded paper. "I wrote down the name she mentioned, something about investments overseas. Operation Maple, she called it. She said that with your signature, or without it, that money would be out of the country before the end of the year." Ethan felt his blood freeze. Operation Maple. He recognized that name from documents Victoria had asked him to sign weeks ago, telling him they were just routine company expansions, documents he had signed without reviewing, blindly trusting the woman he believed he loved. What had he really signed? And what else was Victoria planning with his money, his name, his company? Ethan stood up and walked to the window, observing the starry night. Somewhere in that city, Victoria believed she had defeated him, isolated him, ruined him, destroyed him. She didn't know that all she had managed to do was wake him up. "Gus," Ethan said without turning around, "tomorrow we're going to the office. You, me, and a lawyer smarter than all of them combined. It's time to find out what Operation Maple really is, and who else is involved." "Yes, young man. And Gus, thank you for never giving up on my parents, for continuing to try to contact me, even when it seemed I had completely forgotten about you." The older man smiled sadly. "A parent never gives up on their children, Mr. Ethan. And though I'm not your biological father, I watched you grow up. To me, you'll always be that boy running barefoot in the yard chasing chickens. Children, even when they get lost, can always find their way home." Ethan felt tears burning his eyes again. He had spent years building walls around his heart, believing that hardness was strength, that coldness was power. But in 3 days, his parents and Gus had taught him more about true strength than all his years of business success. Now, only one question remained. Would he arrive in time to save what Victoria was destroying? And more importantly, would he discover the truth before it was too late for his father? Because while Ethan planned his next move, upstairs, Arthur gasped for breath, pressing a handkerchief to his mouth as his wife slept beside him, unaware that her husband's time was ending much faster than their son imagined. Life has mysterious ways of pushing people towards the truth, and sometimes that truth arrives just as time is running out. The following morning dawned with a strange silence in the mansion. Ethan woke up on his study sofa, surrounded by documents he had been reviewing until dawn. Every paper he found about Operation Maple was like discovering another stab in the back. Transfers authorized with his signature, offshore accounts, phantom investments in companies that didn't even exist. Victoria had not only planned to steal from him, she had planned to destroy him completely. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee pulled him from his thoughts. He followed the scent to the kitchen, and what he saw paralyzed him in the doorway. Eleanor was at the stove, preparing homemade pancakes and maple syrup, just as she used to do in the humble house where Ethan had grown up. Her wrinkled hands worked the batter with movements that spoke of decades of practice. Of early mornings, rising before the sun to prepare breakfast for her family. Gus was seated at the table, peeling oranges for fresh juice, and Arthur watched his wife with a smile that mixed love and nostalgia. "Mom," Ethan whispered from the doorway, "you didn't have to do this." Eleanor turned, wiping her hands on the apron she had found in some forgotten drawer. "Oh, my boy, a mother always takes care of her children. It doesn't matter if they're in a modest house or a palace. Love is served on the plate, cooked with the heart." Ethan felt tears threaten to fall again. He approached and hugged his mother from behind, resting his head on her shoulder as when he was a child, and the world seemed too big for him. "Forgive me, Mom, for all the breakfasts I missed, for all the mornings you spent alone waiting for me to call." Eleanor turned and took her son's face in her flour-dusted hands. "My dearest son, the past is past. What matters is now, and now you are here with me, with your father. That's all I need before." "Don't say that," Ethan interrupted, his voice cracking. "Dad is going to be all right. We're going to find the best doctors, the best treatments." Arthur coughed softly from the table, and for a moment Ethan noticed how his father discreetly brought the handkerchief to his mouth. There was something in that gesture that chilled his blood. But before he could ask, Gus spoke. "Mr. Ethan, there's something you should know. Last night, after you fell asleep in the study, I received a call. It was Sarah, your assistant." Ethan felt all his muscles tense. "Sarah called you?" Why? Gus exchanged a look with Arthur before responding. She said she needed to speak with you urgently, that she had information about Miss Sterling that could help you, but that she couldn't do it over the phone, that she was afraid they were watching her. It's a trap, Ethan said immediately. Sarah worked with Victoria to keep me away from you. I can't trust her. Maybe, Arthur spoke, his voice weak but firm, or maybe she realized she was on the wrong side. My boy, people can change. Sometimes when they see the consequences of their actions, they wake up. Eleanor placed a plate of warm pancakes in front of Ethan, along with freshly brewed coffee that smelled exactly like his childhood mornings. She sat next to him, taking his hand. When you were little, my boy, there was a neighbor who made our lives difficult. Mrs. Clark, her name was. She criticized us because we were poor, because your dad worked with his hands. She said you'd never amount to anything because you came from nothing. Ethan listened, biting into the pancake that tasted of all the memories he had tried to bury. One day, his mother continued, Mrs. Clark's son had a terrible accident. They needed money for the hospital, but she had fought with everyone in the neighborhood. No one wanted to help her. And do you know who went to her house with all the money we had saved? Dad, Ethan whispered, looking at his father. Arthur nodded. I gave her everything we had, because a parent's pain is every parent's pain, and because holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Mrs. Clark cried in my arms that day, and since then, she was the first to defend our family when others spoke ill of us. People can change, my boy, Eleanor repeated. If Sarah wants to talk, maybe you should listen, but carefully, very carefully. Ethan finished his breakfast in silence, feeling the weight of the decision. Finally, he took out his phone and dialed Sarah's number. She answered on the first ring. Her voice sounded scared. Mr. Thompson, thank you for calling. I need to see you. There are things you don't know, terrible things Miss Sterling is planning. Why should I believe you, Sarah? You blocked my father's calls. You kept me away from him when he needed me most. There was a long silence. When Sarah spoke again, she was crying. Because they paid me a lot of money to do it, and I needed that money for my sister's operation. But then I saw your parents in the snow that night. I saw them shivering from the cold, and I realized I had become the kind of person I always swore I wouldn't be. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling a mixture of rage and something that might be compassion. Where do you want us to meet? At the Parkside Cafe at 2. But please come alone, Mr. Thompson. If Victoria knows I'm talking to you. Her voice broke. I don't know what she's capable of. The call ended. Ethan looked at his parents and Gus, searching their faces for some sign of what to do. Go, my boy, Arthur said, but take Gus with you. Have him stay nearby, watching, and if anything feels wrong, get out of there immediately. The hours until 2 p.m. passed like centuries. Ethan tried to distract himself by reviewing more documents, but his mind kept racing. What if it was a trap? What if Victoria was using Sarah to set another ambush? But there was also the possibility that Sarah genuinely had information that could help him. Information that could protect his parents and save what was left of his company. At 2 o'clock sharp, Ethan entered the Parkside Cafe. It was a small place, far from the city center, the kind of place people from his old social circle would never set foot in. Sarah was sitting at a back table, wearing dark glasses, despite being inside. She seemed to have aged 10 years in a week. Mr. Thompson, she said when he sat down. Thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes, Ethan replied coldly, and you'd better make what you have to say true. Sarah took off her glasses. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Operation Maple isn't just financial fraud, sir. It's much worse. Victoria is using your company as a front to launder money for international criminal organizations. The signatures you put on those documents make you a legal accomplice to everything. Ethan felt the world stop. That's impossible, I reviewed. He stopped, realizing the truth. No, I didn't review anything. I trusted her blindly. There's more. Sarah pulled a USB drive from her purse. Here are all the proofs. Emails, transfers, recorded conversations, everything you need to show you were deceived. But there's also something else. Something about your father. Ethan's heart stopped. What about my father? Sarah swallowed, her hands trembling. Victoria investigated his medical history months ago. She knew from the beginning that Arthur was sick, and she used it. She planned everything so that you would discover the truth at the worst possible moment, when your father was so weak that her voice broke, when it was already too late to do anything but feel guilty. Ethan stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. The rage he felt was like liquid fire in his veins. There's more, Sarah interrupted. Your father needs an expensive, Very expensive, experimental treatment. And Victoria made sure to freeze all your main accounts. Without the Caldwell contract, you don't have the liquidity to pay for it. How do you know all this? Because I was the one who managed your financial agenda, Mr. Thompson. I saw everything, I heard everything, and I kept quiet because they paid me to. The tears ran freely down her face. But I can't keep living with this. My sister was saved thanks to the money they gave me. How can I enjoy her life knowing I helped destroy yours? Ethan took the USB drive with trembling hands. In that small device was all the truth. All the documented betrayal, everything he needed to stop Victoria. But there was also the most painful truth, that he had lost valuable years with his father, pursuing a success built on lies. And now, when he had finally opened his eyes, time was running out. There's something else you need to know, Sarah said in a low voice. James Caldwell is not Victoria's lover. He's her partner. The real lover is someone much closer to you. Someone you trusted completely. Who? Before Sarah could answer, the cafe door burst open. 3 men entered, their faces partially hidden by caps. Sarah paled. "Run," she cried. "It's a trap." "They followed me." Ethan reacted instinctively, grabbing Sarah's arm, and they ran towards the back exit. Gus appeared out of nowhere, blocking one of the men with his body. The 3 of them burst into an alley, running as they heard shouts behind them. They didn't stop until they reached Gus's car, speeding away with screeching tires. Ethan looked back, his heart pounding like a war drum. The men hadn't followed them, but the message was clear. Victoria knew Sarah had spoken, and wasn't going to let that information reach where it could harm her. When they arrived at the mansion, Arthur and Eleanor were waiting at the door, their faces pale with worry. Ethan hugged his parents tightly, feeling them tremble in his arms. "I'm okay, Dad. We're okay." But it wasn't true. Nothing was okay. He had the evidence to destroy Victoria, but he also knew she wouldn't stop. And the most terrifying thing was that he still didn't know who the real traitor was, who had been close to him all this time, smiling to his face while stabbing him in the back. That night, while everyone slept, Ethan sat beside his father's bed. Arthur was breathing with difficulty, each inhalation a visible effort. Ethan took his hand, feeling it cold and fragile. "Dad, I'm going to fix this. I promise you. I'm going to get that treatment. I'm going to save you." Arthur opened his eyes slowly. He smiled with that tired but loving smile that only a father can give. "You already saved me, my boy, when you let me into your house. When you chose love over money. You already gave me everything I needed." "Don't say that," Ethan cried. "There's still time. Always time." But deep in his heart, Ethan knew the truth. Time was the only enemy he couldn't defeat, and that enemy was winning. The following days were a race against the clock. Ethan hired the city's best criminal defense lawyer, a man named David Miller, who had a reputation for being relentless with the corrupt. Together, they began to review every document on the USB drive Sarah had provided, building a case that would not only prove Ethan's innocence, but also expose the entire web of crimes Victoria had woven using his name. But while he worked day and night to save his company and his freedom, Ethan watched as his father withered a little more each day. Arthur no longer came downstairs. He stayed in bed most of the time, with Eleanor by his side, holding his hand, singing lullabies as if he were a child. One afternoon, while Ethan was reviewing contracts in the study, Gus entered, his face urgent. "Mr. Ethan, your dad is asking to see you. He says it's important." Ethan rushed upstairs. He found his father sitting in bed, propped up on pillows. He seemed tiny under the sheets, as if life itself was slowly abandoning him. But his eyes shone with a determination Ethan hadn't seen in days. "My boy, sit down. There's something I need to tell you before it's too late." "Dad, don't talk like that. The doctor said that." "The doctor told me the truth you don't want to hear," Arthur interrupted softly. "I have weeks, maybe days. But before I go, you need to know who the real traitor is." Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. "You know who it is?" "How?" Arthur pointed towards the bedroom window that overlooked the backyard. "Yesterday afternoon, when everyone thought I was asleep, I heard voices in the garden. I looked out and saw Victoria talking with someone. They kissed, my boy, and when that man turned around, I recognized him from the photos you have in your study." Ethan's heart pounded so hard he felt it would explode. "Who was it, Dad?" "Your partner, Robert Foster, the man who helped you build your company from scratch, your best friend." Ethan felt as if his heart had been ripped from his chest. Robert, his friend from university, the man who had been by his side at every crucial moment of his career, the one who was supposedly on a business trip in Europe for the past few weeks. "It can't be," Ethan whispered. "Robert, Never. I'm sorry, son. Arthur took Ethan's hand, but I heard what they said. Robert was telling Victoria that everything was going perfectly, that soon they would have total control of your company and could get married without anyone suspecting, that you would be so destroyed you wouldn't even fight. Eleanor entered the room with a tea tray. Seeing her son's devastated face, she set everything on the bedside table and rushed to hug him. "Oh, my boy, what happened?" Ethan told her everything between sobs that embarrassed him but which he couldn't hold back. His mother cradled him as she had when he was a child, whispering words of comfort that echoed all the times she had healed his scraped knees and broken teenage hearts. "My dearest heart, betrayal hurts most when it comes from those we love, but it also teaches us who the true treasures in our lives are. Look around you, my boy. Your dad, Gus, even Sarah, who is trying to mend her mistake. Those are your true allies." A knock on the door interrupted the moment. Gus poked his head in. His expression was grave. "Mr. Ethan, Mr. Miller is downstairs. He says it's urgent." Ethan went downstairs, wiping away his tears. David Miller was in the living room, surrounded by documents scattered across the coffee table. His face showed a mixture of triumph and concern. "Ethan, we have everything we need to bring down Victoria Sterling. Fraud, money laundering, criminal conspiracy. She'll spend years in prison, but there's a problem." "What problem?" "Robert Foster. He got ahead of us. This morning he filed a lawsuit against you, alleging that you diverted company funds for personal use. He has forged documents, but very well done ones, and since he is the other majority partner, he has the power to freeze all your shares until the case is resolved." Ethan felt the world crumble again. How long will it take to resolve? Months, maybe a year, and by then, David didn't finish the sentence, but both knew what it meant. Arthur didn't have months, he barely had weeks. "There has to be another way," Ethan said desperately. "Some way to speed this up." David remained silent for a moment, thinking. Then he looked at Ethan with a serious expression. "There is a way, but it's risky, and you'll need nerves of steel. We have to make Victoria and Robert confess everything publicly, in a way they can't retract." "How?" "With a trap, just like they set one for you." Over the next few hours, Ethan, David, and Gus planned every detail. Sarah, who had been hiding in a cheap motel, agreed to help when Ethan called her. She would be the key piece of the plan. 2 days later, Ethan sent a desperate message to Robert. He needed to see him urgently. He was willing to sign whatever was necessary to end this. He just wanted peace to be with his father in his last days. Robert agreed to meet that same night in the office they once shared as partners and friends. Ethan arrived early, accompanied only by Gus, who remained hidden in the parking lot. What Robert didn't know was that every corner of that office now had hidden cameras and microphones, installed by a team of private investigators David had hired. When Robert entered, he looked triumphant. He carried a briefcase full of documents ready for Ethan to sign his own destruction. "Ethan, my friend, I'm glad you've come to your senses," he said with a smile that no longer seemed friendly, but predatory. "I had no choice," Ethan replied, forcing a defeated tone. "My father is dying. I can't fight this and be with him at the same time. You guys won. It's not personal, brother. Just business." "Just business?" Ethan let a little bitterness creep into his voice. "We were friends since university, Robert. I considered you my brother." Robert shrugged, his mask of false friendship finally falling. "Friendship doesn't pay the bills, Ethan, and you were too soft, too sentimental. When I met Victoria at that conference 2 years ago, I saw the perfect opportunity. She needed your money, I needed your company. It was natural to partner up." Ethan felt nauseous but forced himself to continue. "So, everything was a lie from the beginning, the engagement, the love, everything?" Robert smiled cruelly. "Victoria is an exceptional actress, and you were the perfect fool, so desperate to belong to that elite world that you never wondered why a woman like her would be interested in someone like you." Ethan clenched his fists under the table, but maintained his composure. He needed more. He needed Robert to confess everything. "And my parents? That was also part of the plan?" "Ah, that was brilliant." Robert laughed. "When Victoria found out your father was sick, she saw the perfect opportunity. We kept you away from them until the exact moment, when you would be so devastated by guilt that you would make emotional decisions. And it worked. You broke up with Victoria in front of everyone. You ruined your business relationships. You became the laughingstock of the industry. You're a monster," Ethan whispered. And this time, the emotion was genuine. "I'm a businessman," Robert corrected. "And now, if you sign these papers, we'll let you live in peace your last weeks with your dear old dad. You can keep this little house and enough funds to get by. The rest is ours. The office door opened. Victoria entered with a victorious smile, followed by James Caldwell and two other men Ethan recognized as lawyers for a rival firm. "I see my dear ex-fiancé has finally come to his senses," Victoria said, sitting next to Robert and kissing him on the lips. "How smart, Ethan. You finally did something intelligent. I just want this to end," Ethan said, reaching for the documents. "Wait." Victoria stopped him. "First, I need you to admit something in front of all of us, that you were an idiot to reject me for two old people who didn't even value you while you were growing up. Say it, and we'll sign." Ethan looked her in the eyes, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled. It was a calm, almost peaceful smile. "No." "What?" Victoria frowned. "I said, no." Ethan stood up. "I'm not signing anything, and I'm not admitting something that isn't true. My parents valued me more than anyone in the world. They loved me when I had nothing, and they love me now that I've lost everything. That's something you two will never understand." Robert stood up furiously. "You're crazy. You'll sign those papers, or we'll destroy you completely." "You already did," Ethan said calmly. "Or so you thought. But what you don't know is that this conversation has been recorded. Every word, every confession. And right now, copies of that recording are being sent to the Crown Attorney's office, to the press, and to all your business partners." The color drained from Victoria's face. "You're lying." David Miller entered through another door, accompanied by two RCMP officers. "He's not lying. Victoria Sterling, Robert Foster, you are under arrest for fraud, money laundering, and criminal conspiracy. And this time, there's no lawyer who can get you out of this." The chaos that followed was like a symphony of justice. Victoria screamed threats as she was handcuffed. Robert tried to run, but was tackled by one of the officers. James Caldwell and the other lawyers ran out, trying to distance themselves from the disaster. Ethan observed everything with a strange calm. He felt no triumph, no vindication, only exhaustion, and a desperate need to return home to his father. Gus was waiting for him in the parking lot. The old man smiled with pride. "You did well, Mr. Ethan. Arthur would be proud. He is proud, Gus. He's still here, and I'm going to make sure that every day he has left is filled with love and peace." When they arrived at the mansion, it was past midnight. Ethan quietly went up to his parents' room. Arthur was awake, with Eleanor asleep in a chair beside the bed. "Dad," Ethan whispered, "I did it. They fell into the trap. It's all over." Arthur smiled, tears streaming down his wrinkled face. "I knew you would, my boy. I always knew you would find your way back to what truly matters." Ethan knelt beside the bed, taking his father's hand. "Now we can focus on getting you that treatment. We have time, Dad. We still have time." But Arthur closed his eyes, his breathing growing weaker, and Ethan knew, with a broken heart, that time was the only enemy they could not defeat. The weeks that followed the downfall of Victoria and Robert were the most intense of Ethan's life. The media covered the scandal relentlessly, a corrupt businesswoman and her accomplice betraying a man who had only trusted the wrong people. But Ethan barely paid attention to the news. His entire world had shrunk to a room on the second floor of his mansion, where Arthur struggled each day to breathe a little more. With the accounts unfrozen and assets recovered, Ethan hired the best specialists in the country. Dr. Mendoza, an internationally recognized cardiologist, evaluated Arthur and confirmed what everyone feared. The experimental treatment could give him a few more months, perhaps a year, if they were lucky. But it was not a cure, only borrowed time. "How much does it cost?" Ethan asked, without hesitation. "Mr. Thompson, we're talking about $500,000, and without guarantees. I don't care. Do whatever is necessary." But when Dr. Mendoza left, it was Arthur who took his son's hand. "No, my boy." Ethan looked at him, not understanding. "What do you mean, no, Dad? This treatment can save you. It can give me time," Arthur corrected softly. "Time in hospitals, connected to machines, feeling pain every day. That's not the time I want, son." "Then what do you want?" Ethan felt tears burning his eyes. "Do you want me to sit here watching you die without doing anything?" Arthur smiled with that smile. Ethan had loved his whole life. "I want you to use that money for something better. I want to spend my last days here, in this house, with my wife and my son, without pain, without machines, just love. And I want that, when I go, you know I was the richest man in the world, because I had everything that truly matters." Eleanor, who had been listening from the door, entered crying and hugged her husband. "Oh, you stubborn old man, always so headstrong. That's why you fell in love with me," Arthur joked. And for a moment, Ethan saw in his parents the young people who had met decades ago, when life was hard, but love was enough. Ethan accepted his father's decision, though it broke his heart. He hired nurses specializing in palliative care to ensure Arthur felt no pain. He transformed the master bedroom into a light-filled space, with open windows that let in the sun and the birdsong. He brought photographs of the family's entire life: Arthur young in his construction worker's overalls, Eleanor sewing by an oil lamp, Ethan as a child chasing chickens in the yard of their humble home. Gus moved into a guest room to be close whenever they needed him. Sarah, who had testified against Victoria and Robert, came twice a week to bring fresh flowers and share coffee with Eleanor. She had lost her job, but found something more valuable: redemption and an unconventional family that had forgiven her when she couldn't even forgive herself. One afternoon, as Ethan read aloud from his father's favorite book, The Old Man and the Sea, Arthur interrupted him. "My boy, there's something I need you to do for me. Whatever it is, Dad. Look in my old suitcase, the one I brought that night. There's a yellow envelope at the bottom." Ethan found the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter in his father's trembling script and an old newspaper clipping. The clipping was from over 30 years ago. It showed a young construction worker receiving recognition for having saved a child from a collapse at a building site. "That's you, Dad," Ethan whispered, recognizing Arthur's young face in the blurred photograph. "That day I almost died," Arthur said. "A wall fell, and a child was trapped. Everyone ran to save themselves, but I heard his cry. I went in and got him out just before everything came down. I broke 3 ribs, but the child lived. Why did you never tell me this?" "Because I didn't do it for recognition, my boy. I did it because it was the right thing to do, and that's the legacy I want to leave you. No matter how much money you have or how much power you achieve, the only thing that counts is what you do when no one is watching you. How do you treat those who cannot give you anything in return?" Ethan hugged his father, feeling how fragile his body had become, but also how immense his soul was. "Now read the letter," Arthur said. Ethan unfolded the paper with trembling hands. "My son, if you are reading this, it means my time is ending, and that's all right. I have lived a full life, filled with love and purpose. I worked with these hands until they bled, but I never felt poor because I had your mother and I had you. I am not writing this to make you feel guilty. Parents forgive even before there is anything to forgive. I am writing to remind you who you really are. You are the boy who shared his bread with other children who had less, the young man who studied under the streetlights because we didn't have electricity, but never complained, the man who built an empire, but who, when he had to choose, chose love. That is my son, not the one who got lost along the way, but the one who found his way back home. I ask 3 things of you. 1. Take care of your mother. She is my heart walking in the world. 2. Do not hold grudges against those who betrayed you. Forgiveness is not for them, it is for you, so that you can live in peace. 3. Use your success to help others, especially those who, like us, work hard but need an opportunity. I love you more than words can express, and I will be with you always, in every good decision you make, in every act of kindness you perform. Your adoring father, Arthur." Ethan finished reading, his face drenched in tears. Eleanor entered and joined the embrace. The 3 formed a circle of love that no betrayal had been able to break. The days turned into a precious routine. Breakfast prepared by Eleanor with recipes she had perfected for decades. Afternoons where Gus told stories of when Ethan was a child and got into trouble chasing chickens. Nights where the 3 sat together, sometimes talking, sometimes in silence, simply enjoying being together. Ethan used his recovered fortune to create the Arthur and Eleanor Thompson Foundation, dedicated to providing scholarships to children of hard-working families who wanted to study. The first recipient was the daughter of a housekeeper, the second the son of a construction worker. Sarah became the foundation's director, finding in that work the redemption she had sought for so long. Every time she awarded a scholarship, she thought of the calls she had blocked and the pain she had caused. And each time she renewed her commitment to doing good. One morning, a few weeks later, Ethan woke up and knew something had changed. The silence in the house was different, heavier. He went upstairs with his heart in his throat. Arthur was in bed with Eleanor lying beside him, holding his hand. Gus was sitting in a nearby chair, silent tears streaming down his weathered face. "My boy," Arthur whispered when Ethan entered. "Come, sit." Ethan knelt beside the bed, taking his father's other hand. "Dad, the doctor said he would come today. We can adjust your treatment." "I no longer need treatments, son." Arthur smiled peacefully. "It's time. And I'm ready." "No," Ethan cried. "You can't go. There's still so much I want to do with you. So many breakfasts to share, so many stories to hear. And you've given me more than I ever dreamed of, my boy. These last days with you have been the greatest gift of my life. I go happy. I go complete." Arthur looked at his wife, caressing her face with fingers that barely had strength left. "Eleanor, love of my life, thank you for every day, for every sacrifice, for giving me the greatest gift a man can receive, an extraordinary son. See you soon, old man," Eleanor cried. "Don't take too long waiting for me up there." Arthur smiled and closed his eyes. His breathing became slower, calmer, and then, with his family surrounding him, with the sun coming through the window, illuminating his peaceful face, Arthur Thompson departed. There was no drama, no pain, just a last soft exhale, like a sigh of relief, as if he could finally rest after a life of hard work and unconditional love. Ethan sobbed, clinging to his father's hand, feeling the warmth slowly leave it. Eleanor kissed her husband's forehead one last time, whispering words of love that only she and he would understand. Gus prayed in silence, thanking life for allowing him to know such a noble man. The funeral was simple, but full of love. There were no crowds of executives or corporate pomp, only the people who had truly known Arthur, neighbors from his old community, co-workers, families he had helped without expecting anything in return. During the service, Ethan spoke with a broken but firm voice. "My father taught me that true success is not measured in bank accounts, but in lives touched. Not in properties accumulated, but in love shared. I spent years chasing an illusion of greatness, and I almost lost the only thing that truly made me great, the love of my family. But my father gave me something more precious than time. He gave me a second chance. He showed me that it is never too late to choose love over pride, family over ambition, what is real. And though today my heart is broken, it is also full, because I had the privilege of being the son of Arthur Thompson, a man who never had much, but who gave everything." After the funeral, life continued, transformed. Eleanor moved permanently into the mansion, filling every corner with the love only a mother can give. She cooked for Ethan, scolded him when he worked too much, and little by little turned that cold house into a true home. Gus officially became the property manager, but more than that, he became the grandfather Ethan had never had. Together, they built a small chicken coop in the backyard, in honor of old times. Sarah continued to run the foundation with renewed passion. Every scholarship awarded was another step towards redemption, and though she would never completely forgive what she had done, she learned to live with it while doing good. Victoria and Robert were sentenced to 15 years in prison for fraud and money laundering. Ethan did not attend the sentencing. It no longer mattered. He had learned that revenge does not bring peace, only more bitterness. A year after Arthur's passing, Ethan was in the garden watching his mother water the flowers when Gus approached with an old box. "Mr. Ethan, I found this cleaning out your dad's room. I think he wanted you to have it." It was Arthur's toolbox, the same tools with which he had built houses, raised walls, fed his family. Inside was a final note. "Son, these tools built our livelihood. Now you build something greater, a legacy of kindness. I love you, Dad." Ethan hugged the box to his chest, feeling his father's presence as if he had never left. And in a way, he hadn't left. He was in every right decision Ethan made, in every act of kindness, in every moment where he chose love over money. That night, Ethan sat with his mother on the porch. Eleanor knitted a scarf as the stars began to appear in the sky. "Mom, do you think Dad would be proud of me?" Eleanor stopped knitting and took her son's hand. "My boy, your father was always proud of you, even when you were lost, because he knew you would eventually find your way back. And you found it, my dearest son. You found it." Ethan looked up at the starry sky, feeling a peace he hadn't known in years. He had lost a fortune, gained another, lost friends who turned out to be enemies, and regained a family that had always been there waiting for him. And somewhere, beyond the stars, he was sure Arthur was smiling, because his son had finally learned the most important lesson, that love is the only wealth no one can take from you, the only inheritance truly worth leaving. The wind blew softly, rustling the flowers Eleanor so carefully tended. And in that whisper of the wind, Ethan could swear he heard his father's voice. "Well done, my boy, well done." And for the first time in a long time, Ethan knew with certainty that everything would be all right, because he had learned that true success is not reaching the top and staying alone, but reaching it with the people you love and building something that endures beyond your own life. He had lost time, he had lost money, he had lost his father, but he had gained something infinitely more valuable. He had found his way back home, and that, in the end, was all that truly mattered.